This is the most infamous set in comedy history.
Norm Macdonald was kicked out of the state by the governor.
The newspaper the next day estimated that Norm had walked 80% of the audience.
Oh my God, how many people are there?
There are thousands of people there.
Thousands.
In 1997, Norm Macdonald was doing Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live, and this was arguably the peak of his fame on television. Given his monumental status and success, Norm was doing a national tour alongside fellow SNL cast members, and one of the cities they performed in was Johnson County, Iowa, at the University of Iowa. This is one of the most infamous performances in comedy history, and if you don't know the story of Norm Macdonald's performance at the University of Iowa, resulting in Norm Macdonald being kicked out of the state of Iowa, then you've come to the right place. I will be explaining in detail what happened that night and how it impacted Norm Macdonald afterwards. To get a crystal clear understanding of what happened on that fateful day, we need to start off by establishing the full timeline of events. To begin with, on June 22nd, 1997, Norm Macdonald was headlining a national comedy tour, and alongside him he brought Jim Breuer and Darrell Hammond on the road to open for him. At the time, this was the golden years of Saturday Night Live, and most comedy fans were following just about everything the show did. Jim and Darrell were well known on Saturday Night Live for their impressions, but Norm Macdonald had obviously been a much bigger standout and draw given his presence on the Weekend Update news segment and his legendary impressions of Burt Reynolds, David Letterman, Bob Dole, and so many more. Anyway, the Transamerica Corporation, formerly known as Aegon, was looking to raise money for the Iowa Athletic Hall of Fame in Finkbine golf course renovations. To do this, they had plans of running a golf tournament that weekend, and then following this, there would be a corporate comedy show headlined by Norm Macdonald to entertain the people playing in the golf tournament and their families. This was set to be one of the best nights in comedy history, where everyone had a great time enjoying some good old-fashioned family-friendly stand-up comedy, or so the Germans would have us believe. Before we proceed, if you're a fan of comedy, you probably know that Norm Macdonald, before he became a deeply closeted dead man, was incredibly well known for being a surgical master of misdirection. Whatever expectations Norm would set for you, he would shatter them right before your eyes and leave you laughing your ass off. Whether it was the Comedy Central roast where he was told to be shocking and vile, so he told clean jokes from an old-school joke book, or telling Artie Lang in San Francisco to not do any gay jokes, just to turn around and do exclusively gay jokes during his own set, Norm Macdonald would often surprise everyone, and this made him one of the funniest guys on the planet. So at this comedy show in Iowa, there were elderly people, children, and entire families showing up to watch the SNL cast members. Since the comedians were on TV, every audience member in Iowa came in with the expectation that they would be TV clean in their act, similar to Saturday Night Live. The audience was absolutely massive too. At the University of Iowa, the comedy show took place at the Hancher Auditorium, which seats just under 2,000 people. Jim Breuer actually recounts this event on Theo Vaughn's This Past Weekend, and in a comedy set he posted on his own YouTube channel. And he talks about how Norm was spending time with the governor. Watch this.
This is the first time me touring with a star.
Okay.
We go to the airport and people are like, oh my God, you're Norm Macdonald. Like, wow, this is everywhere we went. Oh my God, you're Norm Macdonald. We show up at the university. He's like, I got to go golfing with the fucking governor tomorrow. They made me a fucking golf. Fucking governor?
Yeah, what is that game where you fucking hit the
right?
thing?
So I'm like, he's with a governor. This is huge.
I show you this just to really emphasize how big of an event this was in Iowa and how the entire city was all but idolizing Norm before the comedy show took place. Furthermore, there's a podcast episode with Tom Segura, Brian Redband, and a guy named Mike Bridenstine who was in attendance at this comedy show in 1997 and recounts his experience there. I'll show you a little bit of it here.
So this is
There are old people there. There are little kids there.
so it's a huge event.
Yeah.
And
There's thousands of people there.
and it's billed as family night.
Family night. Okay. So, Comedy Sports goes up first. They're whatever the fuck they are.
Right. Okay.
Then Darrell Hammond goes up and does impressions. He's completely it's going great. Norm Macdonald headlines. The newspaper the next day estimated that Norm had walked 80% of the audience.
Oh my God, how many people are there?
There are thousands of people there.
Thousands.
But he goes, yeah, I used to be married to my wife, and I used to jack off to more than I my wife. People start like looking around, like people are like, oh, what's going on? He goes, yeah, this one I saw is a beautiful woman gets by a pig. People are lining out. He's like, Yeah, big fat pig. It's a beautiful woman.
Absolutely unreal. Norm Macdonald did a clean comedy show that was billed as Family Night, and to open the show, Norm just immediately goes filthy. The reaction in Norm's set was so negative that the University of Iowa Athletics director, Bob Bowlesby, issued an apology to the town the morning after. He went on the record to say, quote, "To call it off-color would be a rather significant understatement," end quote. Bob Bowlesby said his 4 children were in the audience along with other children, and he and many parents hustled their children out of the auditorium, and he also estimated that Norm walked 80% of the audience, which was mainly the older folks and their children. However, according to Jim Brewer, the only people that stayed to watch were the college kids, and they were absolutely loving Norm's act.
I never saw a place clear out. It looked like a fire alarm was going off. But the college students were staying, and they were howling with laughter. And he...
As mentioned earlier, people were grabbing their children and sprinting out of the auditorium like there was a fire, and Norm just soldiered on and continued to do his off-color material. According to Jim Brewer, as Norm noticed more people leaving, he even commented on this in the middle of his act and playfully sneered at the people as they left. Check this out.
And then in the middle, after about 15 minutes, he goes, "Jesus Christ, what are you want? Fucking airplane jokes? You want fucking 7-Eleven jokes? Jesus Christ, get out of here."
So Norm didn't slow down for a second and just continued to be absolutely filthy on stage. Apparently during Norm's set, Bob Bowlesby said they were trying quite literally everything in their power to get him off stage, and Norm just wouldn't budge. In the process of Norm mortifying over 1,000 people with his vulgar jokes at a clean comedy show, Norm would then be vilified by the state of Iowa. According to Jim Brewer, the governor went on TV and publicly condemned Norm's actions and also rescinded his invitation to the golf tournament.
The next day, in the paper, USA Today or the Gazette, they're like, "Norm Macdonald's out.
Wow.
Governor wants him out of the state.
Governor wants him.
Get out of my state."
This whole situation in Iowa turned Norm into an infamous comedian who was widely disliked amongst a lot of the residents of the city. Absolutely fucking hilarious. Not only do diehard comedy fans like us find this funny, but Norm himself finds this really funny too. I'll prove that in just a little bit. However, after the performance, Norm would go on to do several interviews about the entire Iowa debacle. One of them was an interview Norm did where this guy, who I cannot find the name of, asked him about the show, and he then described it for us a little bit.
What could you possibly have said to them to make 80% of them walk out?
Oh, it wasn't a speech. It was like some stand-up.
Yeah, well, what did you say to them?
I was just talking. Like, I don't have my stand-up act. I just talk about whatever I'm thinking about lately.
So
But at the time, it was about having sex with an animal. I can't remember what joke, but it was some joke about, like, I said, I feel sorry for the animal because, you know, they get to have sex with a super hot lady, and then the next day they bring him back another pig. You know, because the pig initially, he was having sex with another pig. He didn't know. He was, hey, this is a nice looking thing.
I love how the entire time Norm talks about ruining these people's night, he just has a big smile on his face the entire time. Norm also talked about the show on The Howard Stern Show and details how he was paid $15,000 for the one performance. I couldn't imagine the look on the college organizer's face when they had to hand Norm that check right after that set. I bet it was one of the most awkward exchanges, and Norm probably loved every second of it. Apparently, Norm even tried to play golf after the fact, and they wouldn't even allow him on the course. Imagine allowing O.J. Simpson to play golf on your course, but not Norm Macdonald. I mean, this Norm guy must have been a real jerk. Since there's no audio from that night, obviously it's impossible to tell exactly what all the material was that Norm performed besides what was accounted for. Luckily, there's a channel called Norm's Stand-Up Vault that has a snippet of a set that was deemed likely the most similar setlist to the one Norm performed at the University of Iowa. I'll show one of my personal favorite parts for your own personal enjoyment. Here it is.
Oh, you ever have those friends of yours go, "Hey man, I got a video of a guy fucking a pig." You're like, I don't care. Yeah, it's on my computer. I'm a computer expert. Yeah, I'm right into the computer. I got snakes coming out of ladies' I can show it to you. Come on in mine. I'm like, no, that's all right. I don't want to see it. Some guy fucking a pig, man.
Now some of you may ask, why did Norm do this? Why did Norm take a clean comedy gig and then do vulgar material? Was it on purpose? Here's the answer. Yes, it was 100% on purpose, and he likely did it for his own entertainment. We know that Norm loves to torture people in a way that makes himself laugh, so he did that to Iowa City. How do I know he loved it? Because according to 98.1 Cook, or as I like to call it, cock.com, in November 1997, the writers at Saturday Night Live visited Norm's office, and inside there was a bulletin board. If you've worked in an office setting, bulletin boards generally contain goals, achievements, or things you or a coworker may be proud of. There were only two things on Norm's bulletin board. One was a letter from Senator Bob Dole, who Norm often impersonated on SNL, and the other letter was from the University of Iowa informing Norm they had withdrawn his invitation to play at the golf tournament. Absolutely hilarious. For this reason and so many more, Norm will always be my hero. As a deeply closeted 23-year-old gay man, I can't help but adore Norm's ability to truly and remarkably do his own thing at all times. All in all, this was the most infamous set in comedy history.